Hi, my name's Kevin Dunn. I'm a senior consulting engineer for Apple, and we're here today to talk about directory services with emphasis on Active Directory. So why do we even care about directory services? Well, as an administrator, it provides a central repository for managing user and group data. I can store client management settings, and it allows me to provide network-based services with authentication. So there are multiple forms of directory services. Two that we happen to be talking about today are Apple's Open Directory and Microsoft's Active Directory. Let me show you how I would join or bind to these domains so that we can manage the machine settings. I would launch Directory Utility, and I have two methods of joining the domain. One is to click on Directory Server, click the plus button to add, and provide the server information. Or I can do the advanced settings, which allows me to click on each individual plugin and join to the domain. Let's add this machine to Open Directory. I would simply click on the New button, provide the server information, type in the directory administrator's name and the password for the directory administrator, click the Continue button. Once that completes, we can verify that it has been added to our search path or search policy by clicking on the Search Policy tab. This shows the authentication path for opendirectory.apple.edu. So that's how we integrate with Open Directory. Macintosh can also integrate easily with Active Directory. Let's take a look at how that might work. First, you would enable the Active Directory plugin, hit the Apply button, then the Edit button. If your domain is not already specified, you can type that in, and you would want to use a unique identifier for the computer. I can hit the Bind button at this point. However, let's take a moment to look at the advanced options. The user experience allows me to set Manage Client for OS X settings specifically for things like create mobile account on the local machine. This allows me to take my computer off network and still authenticate with my password and manage settings. Further, we can force the local home directory on the local machine. This allows me to create data such as Word documents, Pages documents, anything that I create as a user gets stored in this directory. We can use the UNC path, which stands for Universal Naming Convention, to a network volume where my home directory would reside. This can be used using AFP, Apple's filing protocol, or SMB, Server Message Block. Looking at the Mappings tab, we have the ability to map a UID, unique identifier, to a unique ID in Active Directory. Active Directory has to have additional installs for this unique ID, but this is provided for heterogeneous environments for machines such as Linux, Solaris, as well as Macintosh, if so needed. Finally, the Administrative tab allows me to specify a specific domain controller if I have multiple domain controllers. This is essentially important for wide area network connectivities where I'm spread from East Coast to West Coast. I can allow administration by specific individuals or groups on the local machine. This allows me to log in using my network credentials and specify things such as network settings. Finally, we can allow authentication from any domain in the forest because there might be multiple domains, such as child1.apple.edu or child2.apple.edu, and Kevin is in either one or the other domain. Now that we've taken a look at the advanced settings, let's go ahead and join to the domain just using the default settings. I would specify the local admin credentials so that I can write the information to the computer. I would specify a user that has permission to join machines to the domain. In this case, I've created a user called Active Directory Bind with a password. So let's add a specific OU or organizational unit. And I've created an OU called Apple Machines. So we're going to add this computer object to the Apple Machines OU. So there's a 5-step process that the plugin uses to join the domain. The first step is searching for forest and domain information. The second step is finding the nearest domain controller to my computer. And the third step is to verify the credentials that I used, in our case, AD-bind. The fourth step is to search for existing computer objects within the domain. And then finally, the fifth step is to bind or join the domain and write the information to the local machine. Once it's joined, we can verify in our search policy that it has been joined to the domain. You'll notice that we have 2 grayed out options: local default, BSD local, LDAP, v3, Open Directory, apple.edu, and Active Directory all domains. That's the search policy to find a user. So for example, if I type in Kevin at the login window, it goes through that specific search path in order to find that user information. Let me close the directory utility application and launch terminal window so that I can verify domain name information. You would do that using the nslookup command and set type equal to SRV for service record. Now if you're using a PC, you want to set the type equal to all instead of SRV. We can now look up the global catalog information, which is the big picture of our domain, using the transmission control protocol and our domain name, such as apple.edu. Once I do that, some information is returned to me. Specifically, after the service equals 0 is the priority. Then the waiting, 100, then the number 3268. That's the specific port that we're talking to find the global catalog information. It also provides us with the domain controller that we're talking to. We want to look at this information for global catalog, for LDAP, Kerberos, and kpassword. So let's look at those. You'll notice that each protocol has a specific port number. Sometimes these are blocked by routers or firewalls, and then you wouldn't be able to join or bind to the domain. So how can you tell if the domain is or those ports are open? Well, one easy method is to use the command telnet. I would telnet to a specific port number on the domain. So apple.edu, and then, for example, 3268. If I get the command connected to apple.edu, then that port is open. You would do this for each of the 4 ports to make sure that you can talk specifically to this domain controller. One other important item to verify prior to binding is your time. The machine has to be within 5 minutes of the domain controller. If it's outside of the 5-minute window, the machine will not authenticate or bind to the domain. So we've joined to Open Directory and Active Directory. We've talked about domain name services and the information provided within it. We've also talked about timing issues for Kerberos. So these plugins provide user authentication at the login window, Kerberos tickets for single sign-on to network services, the ability to cache user credentials for offline use, access to a user's network home directory, consistent UID for POSIX permissions on files and folders, as well as direct use of the Active Directory GUID for access control lists and group memberships.